In 1938, LNER Class A4 No. 4468 Mallard recorded 126 miles an hour on the East Coast Main Line. That figure remains the authenticated world speed record for a steam locomotive. No later steam engine has displaced it under accepted record conditions. This film is about the class that made that possible, Sir Nigel Gresley's A4 streamliners, built for prestige, publicity, and sustained high-speed work on Britain's East Coast route.
By the mid-1930s, the London and North Eastern Railway needed more than ordinary express power on the route between London and Scotland. Rival companies were selling speed and modernity to passengers and to the press. The LNER wanted timetable credibility and a public image to match. On the East Coast Main Line, minutes and headlines both mattered, and the two were treated as parts of the same commercial problem. Sir Nigel Gresley, the company's chief mechanical engineer, answered with a new class of streamlined Pacific, the A4. These engines were not experimental machines held back for record attempts. They were built as working, high-speed express locomotives, intended to appear regularly in service on the principal East Coast routes. Streamlining was there to cut drag at the speeds the railway wanted to advertise and sustain in daily operation. Prestige, publicity, and engineering were treated as one problem from the outset. The A4s were meant to look modern and to run hard. They were a fleet solution, not a single show engine. Doncaster Works built approximately 35 of them across the production run. That number matters because it confirms the LNER was not hedging, it was committing to a class. That combination of image and performance is why the A4s still dominate the story of British steam speed. The class produced a world record, but it also produced a daily service. When people picture a British streamliner, they are usually picturing an A4, and the reason for that goes back to decisions made before a single record was attempted.
The first of them was number 25 Silver Link, introduced in 1935. Silver Link opened the A4 era, and it did so in public. It fronted the publicity for the Silver Jubilee service, a named express running between London and Newcastle, and it fixed a new silhouette in the public mind, a wedge-nosed streamliner in place of a conventional smokebox front. Before Silver Link, British express engines were largely read as a collection of visible components, boilers, chimneys, and driving wheels. The mechanical arrangement was legible from the platform. After Silver Link, the LNER could sell a complete shape, a single unified form that moved through a station rather than presenting its parts to onlookers. The cladding concealed the working machinery and offered instead a smooth, tapered outline from nose to tender. Publicity runs for the Silver Jubilee made that shape familiar far beyond the passengers who rode the train. Photographs circulated. The press covered the service. The company was not only hauling passengers between London and Newcastle, it was advertising a new kind of express machine, and Silver Link was the physical argument for that claim. Silver Link matters in this history because the streamliner program did not begin with the world record. It began with a service engine designed to look and run like the future of the East Coast Main Line. The wedge front, the streamlined cladding, and the publicity method were already established before the 3rd of July 1938. Everything that followed in the class, including Mallard, built on that foundation. The silhouette the world now associates with the record was already 3 years old when Mallard made its run.
The A4 was a Pacific, a 462. That wheel arrangement placed a 4-wheel bogie at the front to guide the locomotive, 6 coupled driving wheels in the middle to deliver power to the rail, and a 2-wheeled trailing axle at the rear to support the firebox. It was a well-established layout for large express engines, chosen because it balanced a substantial boiler with the driving wheel diameter needed for sustained high-speed running. The front end was shaped to reduce air resistance at express speed. Streamlined cladding covered the boiler and the front of the locomotive, giving the A4 its characteristic wedge profile. That profile was not purely decorative. At the speeds the LNER wanted to advertise and maintain, reducing drag had a measurable effect on the power required to sustain a given speed. Many A4s ran with corridor tenders. A corridor tender contained a passageway through which a relief crew could move from a support vehicle to the footplate without stopping the train. That detail mattered on long, non-stop runs between London and the north, where a single crew could not reasonably be expected to work the entire distance. The corridor tender was a practical solution to a practical problem, and its inclusion confirms that the class was planned for sustained high-speed work across long distances, not for a single time dash. Mallard itself was fitted with a double chimney, which improved the exhaust flow and contributed to the performance available during the record attempt. Taken together, the Pacific wheel arrangement, the streamlined cladding, the corridor tender, and the double chimney describe a fleet intended for everyday prestige service, with the capacity for exceptional effort when required. Gresley was answering a railway problem: how to move fast expresses reliably while giving the company a public face that matched the speeds it claimed. The A4 design is that answer, expressed in metal and engineering choices. It is why the same basic machine could launch a named service in 1935 and 3 years later produce an authenticated world record. The record engine came from a working class of streamliners, not from a one-off laboratory locomotive.
On the 3rd of July 1938, Mallard made the run that still defines the class. Number 4468 recorded 126 miles an hour on the East Coast Main Line. The attempt used a descending stretch of the route, the gradient at Stoke Bank, to allow the locomotive to reach maximum speed under controlled conditions. The figure was authenticated, and it has never been beaten by another steam locomotive under accepted record conditions. After the run, Mallard needed attention. The locomotive was worked hard to produce the number, and the mechanical consequences were real. That is part of the history, not a footnote. A record that leaves the engine unmarked is a different kind of claim. Mallard's run was an all-out effort, and the aftermath reflects the cost of that effort. The double chimney fitted to Mallard contributed to the performance available on the day. It improved the flow of exhaust gases and allowed the drafting to work more effectively at high output. That was not an accident of preparation. It was an engineering choice made in the context of a class already designed for speed. Mallard became the public face of the A4s because the number was simple and absolute, 126 miles an hour. Silver Link had launched the silhouette in 1935. Mallard attached a world record to it in 1938. From that day, the class was no longer only a streamliner fleet operating a named express service. It was the fleet that held the authenticated steam speed record. The date, the engine number, and the figure are still the shortest way to explain why Gresley's A4s matter outside specialist railway history. Everything else about the class, the design choices, the service record, the preserved survivors, sits in relation to that single authenticated number.
Mallard was not alone. The A4s were a class, not a single celebrity engine. The approximately 35 locomotives built at Doncaster Works shared the same Pacific layout and the same streamliner design logic, even as individual engines took different paths through service, naming, and eventual preservation. Among the survivors, Bittern keeps the streamliner silhouette in public view. Bittern is a sister locomotive to Mallard and Silver Link, built to the same design and carrying the same wedge-nosed profile. In the modern era, it has operated on the main line under steam. That matters because it allows people to see the A4 shape in motion, rather than only as a static museum exhibit. A moving A4 makes the design argument visible again: wedged front, streamlined cladding, and Pacific motion working together at speed on the same East Coast route the class was built to serve. Number 4498 carries the designer's name, Sir Nigel Gresley. That locomotive is a preserved example of the class and functions as a public reminder of the man behind the design. Naming an A4 for Gresley fixed the connection between the engineer and his machines in a way that outlasted the working lives of the locomotives. When that engine appears at an event or on the main line, the class and the designer arrive together in a single object. Preservation is why the A4s still feel present after timetable steam ended in Britain.
The engines that remain are not abstract labels in a record book. They are the same basic design the LNER sold to the public in the 1930s, maintained and operated by people who understand what the class represented. Bittern and Sir Nigel Gresley stand for the wider fleet that Silverlink began and Mallard made famous.
So why does Mallard's record still stand? The answer is not simply that no later steam locomotive was fast enough. It is that the conditions which produced the record were not repeated. After the Second World War, railway priorities shifted substantially. Money, fuel, and government policy pointed toward diesel and electric traction. British steam kept working for years on ordinary and express duties, but the commercial case for another official steam maximum faded alongside the case for steam itself. The LNER's speed culture on the East Coast Main Line, the culture that had driven the Silver Jubilee service and the record attempt of 1938, did not survive the war in the same form. The combination that produced Mallard's run was specific. It required a purpose-built streamliner class with the engineering capacity for high-speed work. It required a publicity-driven speed culture on the part of the railway company, and it required a controlled, sanctioned record attempt with the authority and documentation to make the figure stick. Other locomotives were fast in service, other claims appear in railway law, but the authenticated world steam speed record remains Mallard's because the industry moved on before another official attempt of that kind could be organized and verified. Diesel and electric services closed that window. Once the timetable future no longer depended on steam prestige, there was no commercial reason to risk engines and reputation for a new steam number. The record was not defended, it simply was not challenged under the conditions that would have allowed a new figure to displace it. That is why 126 miles an hour still stands. Silverlink started the streamliner era in 1935. Mallard set the number the world still quotes in 1938. The preserved survivors keep the shape visible in the present, and the record stands because the circumstances that created it belonged to a particular moment in British railway history that did not return.
The A4s remained the high watermark of British steam prestige on the East Coast Main Line. Stay curious.